All right, welcome. Today we're going to jump into a really fascinating logical puzzle. This one tries to answer one of the biggest questions philosophy has ever asked. Is there really such a thing as absolute truth? We're going to walk through this powerful step-by-step argument and see exactly where it leads us.
So here it is, the big question. Adakah kebenaran mutlak? Or, is there absolute truth? Now, to tackle this, we're going to do something a little clever. Instead of trying to prove that it does exist, we're going to start by assuming the opposite and just see what happens.
So yeah, to get to the bottom of this fundamental question, we're going to run a little thought experiment. Let's just put this idea on the table. There is no absolute truth, okay? We'll treat that as our starting point, our first domino. Now, let's give it a little push and see what follows.
Okay, so what happens if the absolute is just gone? Let's trace the immediate consequences of this one simple idea.
Well, the very first thing to fall is certainty. I mean, think about it. If there are no absolute, unshakable truths, then how can you possibly know anything with 100% certainty? You just can't. Certainty needs a solid foundation, and our whole premise here is that such a foundation doesn't exist. And this is where it starts to get really wild. You see, if nothing is certain, then the boundary between what's possible and what's impossible, it just dissolves. Without any absolute rules governing reality, what's to stop the most absurd things from being true? The door is suddenly wide open for literally anything to happen. Our source material has a great name for this, the rantai kemustahilan, which translates to the chain of impossibility. It's perfect because each logical link just pulls us deeper and deeper into a world that makes no sense. And this slide just lays out that domino effect perfectly. Step 1, we deny absolute truth. That forces us into step 2, denying certainty. With no certainty, we have to move to step 3. We have to accept that even the impossible might now be possible. And if anything is possible, well, that leads us straight to step 4. We have to accept contradictions. You can see how each step is an unavoidable consequence of the one before it.
Now, that last step, that's the real kicker. What does it actually mean to accept a contradiction? It's a pretty abstract idea, so let's make it more concrete. Let's see just how bizarre this concept really is.
And here you go. This is what we're talking about. A contradiction means something can be true, and its exact opposite can also be true at the very same time. It means a circle can be a square. It means you can be in this room and not in this room at the same instant. This is a breakdown of logic so deep that even the mind-bending rules of quantum physics have nothing on it. It's the total collapse of meaning.
So, if contradictions are on the table, then the word impossible just loses all its meaning. It has no power anymore. Nothing is off limits. The fundamental laws of logic that we use to make sense of the universe, they just evaporate.
And this right here, this is the final, fatal blow to our whole experiment. The source puts it so well. We followed this chain of logic to a point where we have to accept that the impossible transcending its own limits is possible. But wait a second. That very idea is, by definition, impossible. You see? The argument has literally short-circuited itself. It collapses under the weight of its own contradiction.
So that entire chain of logic led us straight into a paradox, a complete dead end. And that tells us something incredibly important. Our starting point had to be wrong. And that realization, it leads us to a certain answer.
So let's just nail this down. The idea that there is no absolute truth leads directly to a logical impossibility. It creates a universe where nothing can be known and contradictions have to exist, which is a paradox that can't be resolved. The only logical conclusion, then, is that our initial premise, our first domino, had to be false.
Which brings us with a surprising amount of certainty right back to where we started. Is there absolute truth? According to this chain of logic, the answer has to be a resounding yes. In fact, the statement, "there is no absolute truth," is itself a paradox. It's an absolute statement claiming absolutes don't exist. It defeats itself before it even gets started.
So we've just walked through a pretty powerful logical proof, showing that absolute truth seems to be inescapable. But of course, that leaves us with an even bigger and maybe more profound question. If absolute truth does exist, where do we find it? And how would we even recognize it? Now that is a thought to take with you. Thanks for joining me on this one.